All right, you're listening to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. This is episode number 67 with our special guest today, Fernando Angelucci. Angelucci, I say it right?
Yeah, Angelucci.
Angelucci. All right, awesome. And Fernando, I almost called you Angelo. Fernando, thanks again for being on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time this Monday morning to share your knowledge and experience with all of our listeners.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here, Joe.
Awesome. So why don't we get started by asking how you got started in the real estate investing business? Love to hear your story.
Yeah, so it's kind of like 50% of the real estate investors out there. I started when I was 16 years old.
No way.
I picked up.
That's like
I
me.
picked up a book. Yeah, so I picked up a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Awesome.
And that was just mind blowing for me because both of my parents are from Brazil, so I have foreign parents, and being first generation American, usually what you grow up with. Your parents telling you is, hey, get straight A's, graduate college, go work for a good company for 40 years, 45 years, then retire with a pension. That was, what I've been programmed to do. Then I read this book that tells me, hey, that's the opposite of what you should do. What you should really do if you want security and freedom is start your own company. And so after I read that book, that's when I just got this hunger that I couldn't, satiate. After reading that, I started picking up every book I could on, rental real estate, starting businesses. I'm actually looking at my shelf right now. I got things on here like these are books I was reading when I was like 18, 19 years old, like tax-free wealth, reading a book on taxes as a 19-year-old.
That's
so
awesome.
That's really where it started. Yeah, so I destroyed a ton of books while I was in college, but when I was younger, I told my dad I wanted to go into real estate and I wanted to do, I wanted to be my own, entrepreneur. And he said, that's great, but you need a fallback degree. You need something in like the STEM field that if real estate investing doesn't work out, you can always fall back and get a good job. So I said, okay. I ended up getting a ag bioengineering degree from U of I. All throughout the time that I was at U of I, I was learning about running businesses. I actually ran my own painting company my freshman year of college and part of my sophomore year to help offset costs. Did pretty well. And then I just kept reading and going to these seminars and all this stuff during the time I was in college. Then when I graduated, I got a great job with a Fortune 50 company, and I moved out to Iowa. And within the first 13 months of me being out there and working for this company, I realized how much I hated the 9-to-5 world, and I wanted to kill myself every day. So I said, let's do this. Let's jump out of the plane, and that will force me to build the parachute on the way down, right? Instead of, I'll do it later. I'll do it when I have more time or stuff like that, because that never comes around, right?
Sure.
So what I ended up doing was I quit my job. I gave 2 days notice, and then like 3 days into my Tuesday's notice, I called my boss and I told him that was going to be the last day. Couldn't even do the full 2 weeks, and so meet me at the dealership to get my truck back. And then I pulled out all the money that I had in my 401k, and I got hit with all the taxes and penalties. So that was some startup marketing capital. And then on top of that, in one night, and now I don't recommend a lot of people do this, but this is the way that I started. In one night, I applied for like 56 credit cards.
Whoa.
And I got something insane, like 12 or 16 of them were accepted. My whole strategy was if I applied for them all on the same day, within the same couple hours, they wouldn't see that I'm applying for all these credit cards.
Right.
So I could try to get as much credit as possible. So I ended up pulling out, I got like 16 cards on my first round, or maybe I think it was 12 cards on my first round. And then I cash advanced like $96,000 off of them, like all in one day. So like here I am, a 21-year-old. I'm in the professional market for maybe not even 13 months. And I already have like almost $100,000 worth of credit card debt just to start off my company,
Right.
So that was
That's pretty
that was
awesome.
rough, and they definitely put a lot of fire under my feet. I had a runway of maybe 3 months of like saved cash in the bank plus the 401k to keep me, with a roof over my head and food in the fridge. And then I just started hitting the ground running. I started doing as much marketing as I could. Specifically, the way I wanted to start was do wholesaling first, because then I would understand how to analyze both rentals and flips, and I'd have to be so good at negotiating that I would have to be able to get them at prices below what other investors can get them, so then I can mark them up and then wholesale them to an investor so he or she could still make a profit, right?
Right.
So that's where I started, and I used a lot of those funds from the credit cards for marketing campaigns. Right off the bat, I started sending probate letters out, pre-foreclosure letters out. You know, I was making all the mistakes, which was good. And then I also, you know, spent close to $30,000 on like some coaching program, which was a mistake, but I didn't know any better at the time.
Sure.
And then very quickly after that, I started finding out about RIA groups, and like yours, I love your RIA as well. I mean, it's real, and you really want people there to do deals together. So I found one that was pretty good in Iowa.
Awesome.
And then I stood up at the front of the room when all the new members were introducing themselves, and I literally said, "Hey, my name's Fernando. I work for this Fortune 50 company. I have never done anything in real estate, but I've been reading for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm willing to work for free for any of you to teach me how you guys invest." And so one of the biggest wholesalers in Des Moines, Iowa, ends up taking me under his wing, and I'm literally starting with the lowest level, where I was walking neighborhoods and putting flyers like indoors. Like that's
Awesome.
how I started learning from other investors, right? At like 6 a.m, right?
I bet that dude loved you.
Yeah, he loved me because it was free, right? It was free, and then so the whole thing is, I anytime he would ask me to do something, I'd just say, like, I'm totally fine with doing this, as like shitty as it seems of a job, as long as you tell me why I'm doing it. Why am I doing this, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how I started learning a lot. So I very quickly started making some good money wholesaling. And then right after that, I started seeing, you know, especially the rental deals that I was sending out. Mm-hmm. I'd circle back with those investors, you know, maybe 3-6 months later, and they were just making amazing returns. Even stuff that, you know, I'm an engineer by training, so I'm very conservative when it comes to running numbers. And I basically, you know, I plan for the worst but hope for the best. So my numbers were also always very conservative on the rental side, especially when I started. And these guys were making crazy returns, you know, minimum 12% cap rates all the way up to 22, 24%. So I said, okay, I need to get in the rental game now. So I bought my first 5-flat. The way I did it was, at the time I was still going to every convention and seminar that I could get my hands on just to network.
Sure.
And I was finding a lot of investors that were also engineers that were just like me in the beginning, where they were, you know, engineers, they end up suffering from analysis paralysis. And they're just like, oh, if I just get just more information, then I'll be able to make a decision. But you can never get enough information. Or by the time you get all that information, you've already lost the deal to somebody that was faster, right?
Right.
So I see all these guys at these seminars, and like every 3-6 months, every year, I see the same guys over and over again. And I'm, you know, I say, hey, you know, Paul, how you been? And then Paul would say, hey, you know, I'm good. You know, still just running the numbers. We're hoping to buy our new property. And then he would ask me, like, how you doing? I haven't seen you in, 6 months. I said, oh, you know, I wholesaled 15 deals, and I bought my first 5-flat and like all this. And they're like, oh, you know, and so what I realized is that these guys are great sources of money, because they're never going to take the risk themselves. You know, 99% of the people that you see at these seminars and these, you know, conventions, they'll never do a deal. They'll just spend the money to go to the seminar, to do the classes, but they'll never actually do a deal themselves because they're paralyzed. So I just come in and say, hey, I can run the entire operation. I can do everything for you. All you need to be is the money partner, and then we'll split everything 50-50. And so that's how I started getting my first couple deals, both rental properties and the couple flips that I've done. As this is happening, I'm being a jerk to my friend Steven. We were roommates in college, and he was working in Chicago for a marketing and advertising company that specifically dealt with like nice new restaurants, kind of trendy stuff. But he was getting paid peanuts, and they were overworking him. So, you know, every time I close a deal, I'd just take a picture of the check and send it to him just to be a jerk. And eventually he got so fed up where he said, I'm quitting next week. Teach me how to do this in Chicago, because I want to get a piece of this. And I said, okay. So I started teaching him how to do it. He started taking off just because just the sheer volume. You know, the MSA of Des Moines was maybe like 400 to 600,000 people. I can't remember exactly. Whereas the MSA for Chicago is like 9 million people. Right. So just the competition alone, you know, when I was sending out these mailers to off-market properties in Des Moines, I was usually one of 5 or 6 wholesalers bidding on the property, not to mention the actual flippers and renters and landlords that I was going to try to sell it to. So it was so hard because my number had to be so tight, I couldn't make any money. So eventually I moved out to Chicago when Steven just started killing it, and he said, hey, I got too much volume. I need help. I need you to come out here. I said, okay. So I packed up my Iowa stuff. I stopped doing mailers. I just let the remaining mailers kind of just fizzle in, and then I would just wholesale them with a partner. So when we moved out to Chicago, immediately our company started growing almost 100% year over year.
Awesome.
Even to this day. And that's kind of how I got here. And since then, I've kind of branched out into different parts of real estate. I'm always looking for things that produce very high returns, have very low risk. I know it sounds like a unicorn, but there's a lot of investments that you can do that actually that you can get those numbers. So, I continued to start doing wholesaling here. I didn't like flipping because the amount of liability that comes along with having your name on title. So what we ended up doing, instead of flipping deals, we just started doing wholesale deals where we would make basically the same profit if we flipped it, right?
Wait, can we take a step back and explain that? What do you mean by the liability of having your name on title?
Okay, so perfect example. An investor that I have been talking to for maybe the last 2 years in Florida because we were setting up our market in Fort Lauderdale.
Uh-huh.
This is a crazy story. So he flips a bunch of properties. He does kind of like the 250 to 450 range, so the things that sell, the bread and butters.
Right.
He had a roofer that the night before got super drunk, showed up to his work site at like 6:30 in the morning, still drunk. Nobody noticed. I don't know if he was the first guy there or just people weren't paying attention. Roofer starts getting on the roof, doing his work, falls through the roof and dies.
No way! Oh, that's terrible.
What happens is, you think that, okay, he'd be insulated and it would be the GC's issue. But here's where the liability came in. Because the GC one day was running late, he had asked the owner to go pick up the decking for the roof.
Okay.
Because there's two mistakes the owner made. One, he didn't have an agreement that specifically stated that the contractors were independent contractors and in no way would be construed as an employee.
Okay.
That's the number one document that you should have. And then the second issue was when he bought the decking for his GC, he was at that point considered an employer of the GC because he bought the materials for them.
Really?
So what happens is the family of the roofer that passed away tries to sue the GC. The GC has no money. He immediately goes bankrupt. And then they go and they sue the owner. They win a $4.5 million judgment.
Oh,
it wipes the guy out. The insurance wouldn't cover anything. Wipes the guy out. He lost the last 15 years of investing all in one lawsuit.
Oh,
so
my
that's
Lord.
the type of liability I'm talking about, where if you're not doing it professionally, you need to have that independent contractor agreement in place. You need to make sure to talk to an attorney that specializes in like builder's liability, because there are these little things where, like you said before we started this call, there are these things that if you do them, it will pierce your corporate veil, and your corporations and entities will no longer protect you from what's called inside liability. Inside liability is liability that comes as a result of your investment activity. So a roofer getting hurt, or if you're a landlord, a tenant falling on your property for whatever reason and then suing you to take whatever's in that entity.
Right.
So that was the issue. So this guy, he lost everything just to go make $80,000. So what we started doing was, in the past, we would, just to get volume through our wholesaling company, we would see what our maximum allowable offer would be, and then we'd offer, $2,500, $5,000 below to make our $5,000 profit, right? Mm-hmm. So we'd put our profit in the middle. Then what we decided is, okay, we're only making $5,000 here, $7,500 there. How do we get these bigger numbers? And we just had to basically rework how we negotiated properties. And so instead of negotiating our, flat $5,000 already into the numbers and starting there, we just tried to get it as low as possible when we knew there was no competition and we were using high motivation lists. And then we started doing these wholesale deals where I made $78,000 on one house.
78.
2 months ago.
78,000 on one deal. That is awesome.
That was in Winnetka. Yeah, that was our deal that we had in Winnetka.
Oh, yeah, I remember you.
Recently, we've just been hitting.
You came to the meetup and presented it, right? Didn't
you?
I
pitched that deal to your group.
Awesome. Yeah. And you found a buyer. That's not through me though, right?
Yeah, we found a spec builder that only builds in Winnetka and Wilmette. He also goes into the western suburbs if he can find a good deal, but he likes the higher value stuff.
Sure.
So he went and he took on all this liability to make, $300,000, and it's going to take him 12 months to flip a deal to make 300. I made 78 in literally 12 days.
Oh.
So look, as far as like the time value of money goes, like I made more money than him per hour because it's going to take him, 12 months to flip that deal so that it realizes profits, where I made 78 in like a week and a half, 2 weeks, right?
Right. No, absolutely. Can I interject with a Joe story real quick that kind of goes along with the roofer story with your buddy down in Florida? I don't think I've ever talked about this before. It's kind of interesting though. I have being a broker, I have the REO portfolio that we manage and we sell for all these banks. So I think it was like December or so of 2014 maybe, I can't remember. And I sold a house that was a bank-owned property, sold it to a random investor. I was not the buyer's agent. I was only the listing agent. Truth be told, I had never, ever seen the property, not even seen pictures of it, because that's kind of how we run it here is the staff handles most of that stuff. And, they evaluate it and everything, and we get it on the market, we get it sold. Well, the investor bought the property like December 12th, and the next week, what happens in Chicago in December?
Yeah.
It snows, right? It's cold, it's icy, it's rainy, icy, it snows. So a roofer goes on the roof, and he falls off the roof and breaks his back, which is terrible. It's unfortunate. And I got slapped with a lawsuit about a month later from the roofer stating that I was liable for the situation because I was the listing agent. Even though I was not involved with the property after it was purchased by the new investor, I was not on title, I had nothing to do with it. They tried to claim that I should have disclosed the condition of the roof prior to letting the roofer on the roof. And he's a roofer, like an actual licensed contracting roofer, not just some schmo that's climbing a ladder that has a hammer and some shingles. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I ended up getting it dismissed, but it's just a good kind of story to go along with what you mentioned about the liability that's in this business and how you got to protect yourself. Luckily, I'm insured to the hilt, and that created some internal investigating on my own. Like, hey, I didn't have to pay anything out of pocket, which is awesome. There was attorneys involved, but the insurance company handled everything and they paid for everything. I didn't have to pay a deductible. Now my rates went up after that, but I ended up kind of restructuring some of the way I do my insurance as a result of that case. But just for the listeners out there to hear, there's a lot of liability in this business. So Fernando, you brought up a great point about that independent contractor agreement and using the right legal counsel to kind of guide you in that path before you even get to a point where you're flipping your first or your 10th house or whatever. So great story.
And one of the things I have another story to kind of go off of it.
Please.
So what you realize is even if you do everything right, everything is buttoned up and you're above board on anything, there are still attorneys out there that are just litigious. Their whole job is to offer clients no money up front, and if they win, they get a contingency fee, a portion of the winnings. So what these attorneys do, their strategy is, okay, let's look at who has money. Let's look at who has money, and let's see if there's any crack in the shield that we can exploit. Even if Joe does everything right, they're still going to try to press a lawsuit to see if they can get you to slip up or get you to admit something. Or even if you did nothing wrong, you can still have lawsuits brought against you. So this is, it's so important to not only structure your entities in a way that does limit your liability from these type of events of happening and having insurance, but then also you need to be cognizant of when you structure these entities, you also need to keep in mind privacy. You don't want some attorney saying, okay, who's this Fernando Angelucci guy? Let's Google him. Let's see what companies he owns. Let's see how many shares of what he owns. Let's see what I can find based on searching the Illinois Secretary of State office or any of these areas that you can find ownership of property. So that's a thing I want to talk to your listeners about here in a little bit, about how to structure entities correctly to not only keep the your taxes low, but then also to keep privacy. So people that are on what I call outside liability, somebody that just sees you down the street driving in his car and decides, hey, he looks like he has money. Let's jump in front of his car and see what I can get.
Sure.
You laugh, but this is a real story. This happens to a lot of people, especially if you look like you have money. You're going to have people that they're down on their luck and they're just looking for a payout somehow. You know.
I think that's a great point. No, you're absolutely right. Why don't we get into that, huh? The entity structuring discussion. Yeah. I'd love to have you explain how you do things to the listeners, and then, obviously we can kind of go over this structure that you put together. Fernando gave me a document I'm going to post to the podcast, so it's going to be available as an attachment, as a link through iTunes and through the other sources we promote through, and the podcast is listened to on. So, go ahead. Let's talk about how you did that.
Okay, so let's first talk about the differences between short-term income and long-term income, right? So if you're flipping or you're wholesaling, you're usually making your profit in less than 365 days, right? So this is what it would fall under short-term capital gains.
Okay.
So the very first thing you want to do is you want to limit the amount of taxes you're paying on those short-term capital gains by running it through an entity as opposed to never do anything in your own name. I mean, in the beginning, if you're just wholesaling and you have no assets to protect, then that's fine. But as soon as you start building some wealth or buying some properties, you need to immediately protect yourself by putting them into entities. So the way that we structure ours is, first and foremost, we have a C Corp. The C Corp is what we run all of our short-term capital gains through, so wholesaling and flipping. On top of that, we also run as many expenses as possible through that management C Corp. The reason I call it a management C Corp is because not only are you going to be using this entity for your short-term capital gains, but this entity is also going to be the manager of any LLCs that you have for passive income, so through rental properties or long-term profit, anything over 365 days, right? Mm-hmm. So this is at the bottom of the pyramid. There's this management company. Then you have your property-specific LLCs. So, for example, with us right now, after liquidating some of our holdings, we only have properties left in our rental portfolio in Chicago and Indiana, right?
Okay.
So we have a Chicago LLC, and we have an Indiana LLC that owns those properties, again, because you never want to own them in your own name. Those are flow-through entities. This is where the structure diverges based on if you're doing it alone or if you're doing it with partners. So I have a 50-50 partner on everything. It's Steven that I was talking about, my best friend and roommate from college.
Awesome.
So at this point, we need a way to split all the flow-through profits from the LLC as well as the capital gains income from the C Corp.
Right.
So we have a LLC that is taxed as a partnership, or Form 1065. So that LLC owns everything that me and Steven are doing together. Our rental property LLC, it owns our management C Corp. Now, that LLC is also managed by that C Corp that it owns, right, that management C Corp. At that point, this is where a single investor, the same thing would apply, so as opposed to a partner. The owner of this partnership, it's 50-50 ownership, is my holdings company and Steven's holdings company. The reason you need this extra level is for tax reasons. When you're going to go apply for, let's call it a loan, and you have properties in a Chicago LLC that are doing great, and you want to go buy a property in Indiana where you have one property, maybe it's not doing as great, or maybe it doesn't have 3 years of tax returns already. Trying to apply for a loan under that Indiana LLC is going to be difficult because it's not showing any income. It's not showing any ownership of properties over the last 3 years of tax returns.
Right.
So what you do is you have this holdings company where all of the income flows through. So anytime you have a new company underneath, or you buy something in Dallas, or you buy something in Fort Lauderdale, all of the income from all your companies flows through your holdings company, and then your holdings company is the one that shows all of the income on the book. So you can go apply for a commercial loan to buy a new property in a new state under a new LLC that has no history, buy it under your holdings company, and then once you close the loan, you deed it over to the new property-specific LLC.
I see.
So that's going to be kind of like the home base where all your income is shown, right? So above that level of the holdings company, we need to start talking privacy, right? So if you got a holding company and you're shown on the Illinois SOS or the Wyoming SOS, Secretary of State, as the owner of that company or the manager of that company, then all of a sudden people start targeting you because you seem like you have money, right? Especially if you have a lot of entities, attorneys very quickly will say, okay, if he has 7 companies set up with him on his name, that means that he's probably doing some sizable gross revenue.
Right.
So how do you hide all this? This is the easiest way. And then it's also a way to plan for estates. So you have a living trust at the very top of the structure.
Okay.
The living trust owns everything. So that anytime somebody Googles Fernando Angelucci or looks into the Secretary of State, me, Fernando Angelucci, the individual on paper, I look so broke that the second an attorney looks at my file, they're going to realize, why am I going to spend all this time? Because I'm not going to get any money from Fernando, which means my 33% contingency fee or 50% contingency fee that I'm charging this client, I'm never going to get paid on that. So I'm not even going to waste my time to try to go after him because everything's owned in some random trust, trust number 12651, whatever,
Right.
Then, as an additional layer of protection, instead of somebody saying, hey, I'm inquiring to find out who the owner of this trust is, if the trustee, aka the person that manages the trust, is your attorney and you're the beneficiary of that trust, now you have client-attorney privilege. The only way that attorney has to release who the beneficiary of that living trust is if he gets subpoenaed, which is it's the very first step in a lawsuit. You subpoena to get information, right? That takes a lot of work. So this is not like a ton of barriers as far as like physical barriers that will stop attorneys from doing stuff, but it puts up so many smoke, mirrors that the attorneys, they don't even want to waste their time. Yes, they could still try to go through this entire process. They think they have a case and they have some other information about what you own, but this way a lot of attorneys are already so busy and they're only going to work on things that they know they can get paid on. So this is going to stop them from pursuing, right? Or digging a little bit deeper just from a baseline litigious standpoint, right? Just trying to see if you have any assets.
Right, because they're going to go for the low hanging fruit. They're not going to spend 4 hours trying to figure out this whole web of structuring you've put together in order to chase something they don't even know is there or not. They're going to look for something that's simple and easy and go, oh yeah, this guy's got 17 properties under his personal name, or he's got 17 property or whatever the number is, under this LLC, and it's easily found on the Secretary of State's website and through just searching through title and things like that. So yeah, no, great point. So yeah, we're going to attach this example. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you're saying you're going to attach it, but so another reason that you have this structure is, one, I said, is privacy. The second reason is for estate planning. The easiest way to transfer wealth and not have it subject to any type of estate tax is by actually gifting ownership of your properties. As you start getting older and you have some kids where you don't want to just give them money, but you want to give them ownership of your companies per year until they're 100% owner. This is a very easy way to do it. So you just gift from the trust to whoever, your kids or whoever you want to put, your wife or husband, whoever you want to put on there. So that's the second reason why, again, it helps for the taxes, makes it a lot easier to gift ownership of properties and LLCs and C Corps over to your offspring or significant other.
Awesome. No, thanks for explaining that. Yeah, and what I was going to say was I'm gonna put a link in the podcast show notes so the listeners can actually download this for themselves if they choose and take a look at what you've put together. Do you want me to white out any of the names of these companies? Like I can just call them LLC instead of putting the actual names?
Yeah, because I think underneath the names of the companies, I put, in parentheses, I put what function it serves, like Holdings LLC or Management C Corp. Yeah.
So that's what I'll do then. I'll just call it, like on the one that has the Chicago Rentals, I'll just put, I'll white that out and put, Chicago Rentals LLC, just so we don't have the real names on there. We don't want to create any unneeded liability in this podcast. Yeah. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
no, that's cool.
I don't even think you need to put anything else, because right underneath it says Chicago Pass-Through LLC, right?
Good
Rental
point.
LLC, so it's already in there.
Yeah, but I really appreciate
just to recap.
Please.
No problem. And so just to recap from the top down, since we started from the bottom up.
Sure.
Let's say you're a new investor and you don't have $10,000 to set up this entire complicated web of entities, right? the baseline ones you should get, number one, depending on what you're doing, if you're going to be a wholesaler or flipper, the very first thing you should set up is a C Corp. And then when you start making some profit, set up a living trust to own that C Corp. If you're doing only rental properties, the very first thing you do is you set up a holdings LLC. Once you make some money, then you set up a living trust and put ownership of that holdings LLC into that living trust. Then as you start getting more and more money, you start filling in the webs, right? If you're a flipper and all you have is the living trust or a wholesaler and all you have is the living trust and the C Corp, as more money starts coming in and you're going to start thinking about applying for loans or whatever it is, then you can insert a holdings LLC in between the C Corp and the living trust, right? And you can just keep adding from there. So once you get to the full-fledged look at it, like I said, top down, it's going to be a living trust that owns your holdings LLC. The holdings LLC owns any property-specific LLCs, and it owns the management C Corp. And then the C Corp manages all your LLCs. And there's a nice little thing that you can do where, for tax reasons, where the management C Corp can charge your LLCs a management fee to offset income and expenses, right? So it's always a delicate game of how do I mean, you got two modes of thinking when you're doing taxes. If you know you're not going to be applying for a loan in the next 2 years, you got to deduct as much as you can and show basically no adjusted gross income.
Right.
If you're going to go apply for a loan, that's the exact opposite of what you want to do. And a lot of investors are going to cringe when I say this, but if you're looking to apply for a loan anytime in the next 2 years, you need to pay taxes on everything. Create additional reasons to pay taxes because all they're going to look at is your adjusted gross income. They don't care. I mean, if you go to a commercial guy, they might look past all the deductions, but it's just easier when you can say, yeah, look at the bottom line. Like, here's all the income I'm getting. Here's everything I've paid taxes on. So you can show that, yeah, I have the cash flow to cover the debt payments, right?
Right. Absolutely. Oh, that's awesome. Great point. Thanks for that explanation again. I'm looking at this piece of paper, and I'm listening to you talk, and I have a bunch of notes I wrote down on it, so I'm going to print a new copy in order to get it prepared to link it to the podcast. Sure. But it's definitely something that I would say Fernando's not giving legal advice. He's not an attorney. I'm not an attorney. But if you're interested in learning more about this, I'd take this document that we're going to provide through the podcast to your legal counsel and see what you can recreate with your attorney, of course.
Yeah, and this structure right now is the structure that is good right now. So the tax laws and liability protection laws change every year. Sometimes they change twice a year.
Right.
So, for example, this is the newest iteration. This is not what my structures looked like in the past, but then all of a sudden Nevada changed the laws. Wyoming became the more favored state for holdings companies and pass-through companies, so I moved all my stuff there, and then I changed up my structure to actually own my C Corp as opposed to the C Corp being a standalone. And that's just because of the laws that changed over the last 12 months. So this structure is always a fluid thing. It's always going to be changing, and you're going to have to pay a couple fees to change where they are in position to each other as well as what states they're housed in. But yeah, sure. Like you said, just take this to a tax professional, take it to an attorney, and hear what they have to say. The best bet is to take it to somebody that does taxes and legal, because then it's a delicate balancing act between liability protection and tax advantages. You know, if you just let the CPA do it, he's going to make it the most tax advantageous structure, but you're going to be not protected from liability, and vice versa with the attorney.
Yep.
If you let the attorney just do it by himself, it's going to be all liability protection, but then you're going to get hit heavy with taxes, right? So it's all about blending it in the correct way.
Oh, great advice. Thank you. I love it. Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on from there. Why don't you talk a little bit about what your business looks like today? I know we talked about the startup. Now we've dived into like the entity structuring that you've put in place over the last few years. I'd say only, but you're 26 years old, right?
Yep, I turned 26 in May.
Oh, awesome. You've done an incredible job with your business to start from a young age and have a real job, quote unquote, and then move into an entrepreneur type living lifestyle. I want to hear more about how your day-to-day looks and what your business is like today.
Yeah, so I'll start with the functions of what we do. So we do wholesaling and every once in a while we'll do a flip. But like I said before, I usually just like to make flip money on my wholesales.
Right.
And we use that income to purchase rental properties. Because our goal, Steve and I, we both want to retire by the time we're 35. I don't know if I'll be able to, but I'd like to have the option to.
Right, sure.
So, and that's the easiest way for that is to come about through rental properties. So we've been taking a lot of our earned income from the wholesaling and flips here and there and pushing them into rental properties. And that's kind of the way that we're going now. We're focusing less on the wholesaling and more on acquiring passive income.
Okay.
So we have our Chicago passive income company. We have our Indiana passive income company. We're trying to sell all the assets out of that to bring more money to Chicago. And then we have the wholesaling company. Then on the other side, or more on the institutional side of things, we have two newer companies. So one of them is a private equity firm that we specialize in sourcing and managing properties for large institutional buyers such as pension funds, hedge funds, REITs. And that's stuff on basically large multifamily. So we're working on a deal right now. It's over 700 units down in Tennessee. We're looking at another one in Florida, a few in Texas and in the Carolina areas. And that's a company just for active income to push into our rentals and eventually turn it into a company that also buys these larger institutional grade assets. The thing that I'm really excited about, and I know we talked a little bit about, is self-storage. So we have another company that the entire purpose is to find money, acquire either active self-storage facilities that have a value-add component to them, or acquire things that can be converted into self-storage facilities.
Okay. Tell me how that works. How do you convert something into self-storage?
Perfect. Yeah. So perfect example is warehouse space.
Okay.
So if you have a warehouse that's on a heavily trafficked route, the easiest way to check is by going to the Department of Transportation. And it hits the vehicles per day count that we need and it has the amount of land we need. What you do is you go in, say you have a 2-story warehouse. It's like the standard type of warehouse that was built between like the 30s and 60s, that it's got a concrete skeleton and then it's bricked in between. Those are perfect warehouses for this type of thing. Then you go in and you convert the warehouse by putting in corrugated steel separators, and then these corrugated steel roll-up doors that you see in these self-storage facilities. The build-out cost is super cheap. The materials are super cheap. And the reason I love self-storage is because compared to rental properties, number one, it's governed by lien law as opposed to tenant law. So I'm sure if you have some Chicago investors in here that have gotten caught with the wintertime evictions and taking 6 months to get somebody out of your house, and they get all these rights even though they're stealing from you. That's not the case with self-storage. It's lien law. So if they don't pay their bill, you can put out 2 notices. On the 30th day that they're late, you can hold an auction, sell off all their stuff, just go into the unit with a broom, sweep it, and then boom, it's re-rented, right?
Right.
The other thing that I love about it is the super low expense ratio. You know, on single-family homes, you're looking at usually, if you're paying for utilities, you're looking at a 50 to 60% expense ratio. So 50 to 60% of your gross revenue goes to expenses, right? And self-storage, because these are just basically, all it is concrete pad with corrugated steel walls and doors. All you really need to pay is for a little bit of electricity to light the place.
Right.
And then that's it. All these units don't have water. They don't have heating. You know, I'm not a fan of the climate-controlled self-storage. Some of them have heating, but I don't recommend it. For Chicago, doesn't make sense.
Sure.
And then maybe some plumbing for the office, for the bathroom and kitchen, if you put a kitchen into your office, right? And so I've seen some portfolios that were held by investors, especially one of the investors that taught me this asset class, where they were having expense ratios from 18 to 28% was like the highest I've ever seen, and that was because they haven't been paying attention to it, and they just let the expenses accrue, right? So that says a lot. If you can keep 80% of your gross revenue as profit, that's pretty great. The
Yes.
other thing I love about self-storage, is the ability to get loans and to purchase them with basically no money. So self-storage, there was a huge boom in the 80s where everybody, they just started building these things with cheap concrete and steel at the time. They could have built a facility for 50 to 100,000, and nowadays that facility can be, let's just say for ease of numbers, it can be valued at about 500,000. The owners don't want to take the capital gains hit all in 1 year, right? And usually these guys, they're mom and pop owners of all the self-storage facilities in the United States. Only like 26 to 28% of them are actually owned by like these institutions like Public Storage and, you know, CubeSmart, the big guys. Everything else is owned by these mom and pop investors. So like 70-something% owned by these mom and pop investors that they just did it as a hobby, or they built it on their farm back in the days when this was farm. Like Algonquin used to be all farms, you know, and the ground was cheap, and then it started exploding. So these sellers usually are the ones that suggest seller financing to you because they want to spread the capital gains out over a certain period of time, and they'll do some type of like installment sale.
Sure.
The second way that I really love is because self-storage is not technically real estate, but it's a business, it qualifies for SBA loans, Small Business Association loans. And specific for the self-storage loans, you can go all the way up to 90% LTV, and then they allow for a 10% seller carryback. So you can walk into a deal with a government-backed loan with zero money. I mean, other than due diligence costs, doing a phase one and property condition assessment, stuff like that.
Sure.
But I think that's amazing. So you can get cash-on-cash returns in the triple digits, you know, over 100% return on your money invested every year. Usually when you say these type of numbers to people, they're like, all right, what's the scam, right? And it's not a scam. It's just the way that the equity stack works, right?
Sure. No, that's awesome.
So that's another reason I love self-storage. And then if you're really going to go into it for the big bucks, the key is to IPO. So just like Public Storage did, you know, the day before they IPO'd on their portfolio of storage facilities, they were all valued at an average of, you know, like 1.1 or 1.2 million. The day after they IPO'd and they brought their company public, each one of their facilities was worth over $12 to $15 million a piece. The investors, all they did was they sold their shares when the IPO happened, and then they 10x'd their money.
Wow. That sounds
so that's
incredible.
Also an option. And usually you can get to that point with as few as 50 facilities that are pretty homogenous and has a system in place, right, to make them run efficiently.
Sure. No, that's incredible.
And then that comes to the last reason why I love self-storage. You can run these things with very little involvement. There's these things called insomniac kiosks where a renter can come in, or potential renter can come in. They have to put their fingerprint down, and they read their fingerprint, takes a picture of their face, and it scans their driver's license. And then from there, they can buy a unit, start renting it. They can buy renter's insurance. They can buy a lock right out of the kiosk. They'll give them a keypad number so they can enter and leave. Every time they come in to put stuff into the storage unit or take it out, they have to enter their code into the keypad so it tracks who's in, and then they have to enter their code again when they leave to get out, so you can track how long those people were there. And then you maybe just pay a part-time manager to be there, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, just for any time you need somebody that doesn't like technology and just wants to talk to a physical person and like sign a physical lease. And
sure,
that doesn't cost much. You can pay these guys. I've seen a lot of people at the $12 an hour mark. I'm more of the mentality of you pay your guys well, they're gonna make your business more profitable anyway. So we like to pay them about $15 an hour plus give them 1 to 2% profit share, because then they'll keep the expenses low as opposed to just looking at the gross revenue. So, and then, even with the locks, say you don't want a manager to be there that often to change all the locks. You can even install these things called iLocks, where they're cylindrical locks that are attached to that kiosk I was telling you about, and will lock automatically if somebody's late on rent, and then alert you by either shooting you an email or a text message.
Wow. Wi-Fi locks. Crazy. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have to, the involvement is so low. And like I said, the potential for profit is insane. And
sounds
leverage,
like So that's something you're currently involved in? You're doing self-storage right now?
Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we've gotten a little bit harsher on our criteria. So the last 3 that we had, we ended up just wholesaling them because they were too small. Right now we're looking for things that are minimum 200 units, but we prefer a 300-unit facility or larger. B, grade assets, so no multi-store, no elevators, because elevators drive the expense ratio up. for repairs and maintenance. Same thing, we don't buy climate control facilities just because the cost to heat and cool these units usually negates the additional revenue that you can charge for a climate controlled unit. I mean, especially Chicago when it drops to, 20 below,
right? And
your heater is just pumping out BTUs just to keep everything from freezing. It's not worth it.
Right, absolutely. Sure.
So that's what we like to buy with the self storage facilities. And the reason we're looking for a 300 unit or more is at that size, the efficiencies of the Insomniac kiosk makes sense. The efficiency of even getting if you want to go super hands off, which is what we want to do. Instead of even hiring our own manager, we hire a third-party self-storage management company to manage our property. But the cost usually makes sense around the 200 to 300 units per location cutoff.
And you're looking all throughout the country for these?
Entire country, yeah. This is one of those things that it's very easy to manage from afar.
Right.
And based on where the Midwest is great because everything in the Midwest is affordable. But specifically looking in like secondary markets. So an example of a secondary market, Chicago, the primary market, secondary market would be like Aurora, right?
Okay.
It's right off of Chicago, but it's still kind of in the metro area.
Right.
So Aurora is a great spot. Anytime you're looking at self-storage, you also want to be around dense housing, so multifamily housing. We like to see 30% plus of the 1 and 3 mile radius being multifamily housing because usually those people don't have enough room to store all their stuff. And Americans are wonderful for self-storage because we love to buy stuff we don't need, and then we get emotionally attached and we never want to throw it away.
Yeah, I know.
It's funny. I was reading this article on self-storage where they were comparing the rentable square footage supply in the nation as well as the cost per square foot compared to market downturns. And it is one of those assets that is recession-proof because when the economy is not doing well and people are downsizing, for some reason when they're downsizing into a smaller home, they still don't want to get rid of all their shit. So they go and store it, even though they can't afford their house, but they don't want to get rid of all the stuff in their house. So they go and they store those things. And then same thing in an up economy. When the economy is going up, what do? You start buying.
You buy more stuff.
Usually things more stuff, right? So it performs really well in both an increasing and a decreasing economy.
Right. That's funny you brought up about stuff because I'm a victim of giving a self-storage facility manager a lot of my money for a long time. When I first started out, Tanis, the company, we're based in West Dundee, and I was initially like a fix and flipper essentially. So I had a bunch of stuff, I had tools and equipment, and in my brain, storing it at my house wasn't the right answer. It was, I got to get a 10 by 10, self-storage because I'm going to have so much more stuff with this flipping business that I'm in. So I rented this unit in Dundee, which is right by the office, back in like 2004 or something. I can't remember. I'm kind of embarrassed.
You just forgot about it?
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly. We've been paying it started at like $92 a month, right? So it didn't, back then it was like, yeah, whatever, $90 a month, no big deal. By the time I closed out the lease, the unit, and emptied the last of my stuff out of there, which was last year, 2016, so probably 12 years,
man.
I was paying $200 a month for it because they kept raising the rent every year. And the only thing in there was like a bunch of empty shelves and like a bicycle that I hadn't ridden in like 5 years. I'm like, oh, this was so stupid. But I couldn't get rid. I was like, nope, can't get rid. I got stuff in there.
You're the perfect client, Joe.
I know, I was.
You're the perfect client.
I'm out of
Were
it
you
now.
also on like some type of auto debit or ACH payment?
Yep, exactly. It was just boom.
Exactly. Set it and forget it. This is what this is the whole this is the whole goal of this asset type. I mean, I love it.
Yes.
Exactly what you said. Your perfect example. You knew you could have moved it out. Every time they raised the rent on you, they raised it just enough, but not enough for you to feel uncomfortable and go through all the hassle of going and moving and cleaning out all your shit out of that unit, right? And over 10 years,
it was like $10.
They doubled the revenue on you, right?
It was less than, it was like $8 to $10 a year they would raise the rent. So I'm like, whatever. And I think I had been to that unit the whole course of the 12 years, I'd probably been to that self-storage facility to go put stuff or remove stuff from the unit probably like 6 times in that time frame, to the point where every time I had to go there, I had to get a new code to get in, and I'd have to like cut the lock off because I'd lost the key. Like I was like every 4 years I'd go visit it. It was crazy. But yeah, it's gone now. Thank you. And you're welcome, Public Storage, or whoever owns that one on, the one I was renting from for so long. That's awesome. Yeah. Like, hey, you gotta make fun of yourself a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's just the truth.
I'm a big fan of that. Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
Can't take yourself too seriously.
Let's talk about. I mean, a lot of great information. I totally appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Your insights into real estate investing and entity structuring, and your attitude about the business, being such a young age as well. I mean, I think is very motivational and inspirational to the listener. What type of advice do you think you could give to someone who's just getting started in real estate investing?
Yeah, this is a great question. There's so many things, but if I had to distill down to the things that have really helped me grow, it's going to come down to one thing. It's having an abundance mentality versus having a scarcity mentality, and only doing business with other investors that also have an abundance mentality versus a scarcity mentality. So what does that mean? Perfect example. This actually just happened to me. So it's an example of an investor with a scarcity mentality.
Okay.
I sent out a deal, like we were talking about earlier in this podcast. My wholesale fees are starting to get pretty fat, right? $40,000, $50,000, $70,000. So that's a lot of money for a wholesaler. Usually, when on average, most wholesalers are in the $5,000 to $10,000 range.
Sure.
Every time we market a deal, we market the deal with the all-in cost. So, say I have a deal for $150,000. I market it out at $200,000. So that includes my fees and all closing costs and stuff like that. I had an investor that he came back and he said, "Hey, this deal looks wonderful. The numbers make complete sense. Send over all the paperwork, and we're ready to move forward today." I said, "Okay." So I sent over all the paperwork. In the paperwork, so he liked that $200,000 number, right?
Right.
In the paperwork, it specifically says, "Okay, Fernando bought this or has a contract on this property for $150,000. His fee is whatever plus closing costs, and it comes to the total price of $200,000." I get a call immediately back from this investor, and he's just screaming at me how he's not going to let he's not going to let me be greedy, and I shouldn't be making more than what a realtor is making, this and that. When he just literally minutes before, he just told me that the numbers were great. They hit all his check boxes, but the only reason he didn't want to do the deal was because he was counting my pennies. He didn't want me making that much money, even though the numbers hit all his numbers, right?
Right,
That's crazy to me, right? Because the deal was good, the numbers were good for him, and then as soon as he saw how much I was making, he decided not to take that opportunity.
Wow.
So he immediately started haggling, and he said, "Hey, well, I'll pay you $5,000 on this one." And I was like, I told him, I said, "Feel free to make any offer you'd like. I'm just telling you, I'm going to take the best offer."
Right.
And then we got a full price offer. Then when he followed up 2 or 3 days later on his $155,000 offer, I told him I sold the deal already, cash. Somebody paid the $200,000, it's gone. And so here's a deal where he would have made close to 40% return,
right?
But he lost the deal because he didn't want me making money, which makes no sense, right? Why are you counting my pennies when you're still going to be making money? So that's a perfect example.
Yep.
So always approach everyone else with an abundance mentality. One of the things that I have found is that the more you give to people, it's gonna come back tenfold. And I know a lot of people think that's like a cliche saying, but this is the truth. Another perfect example, when I was in Iowa and I started doing some pretty high volume, I started helping out other wholesalers for free. I didn't charge them a coaching package. I didn't ask for a portion of their deals. I just helped them. We'd go get some beers, and I'd just tell them how I run the business, the mistakes I've made, stuff like this. Most people that have a scarcity mentality would say, "Why are you wasting your time with these people? Why aren't you charging them because your time is worth something?" Well, guess what? 3 of these wholesalers that I've trained in the past, they got deals that they couldn't close themselves. They sent the deals to me, and I made a ton of money off of them because they remember that I had helped them in the past without asking for anything in return. So truly, when people ask you, why are you helping us for free and stuff like that? My honest to God answer is because I'm selfish. I know if I help you for free right now, someday down the road, maybe next year, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 30 years from now, you'll remember me and you'll cut me in on a deal.
Right.
And I'm going to make great money off that deal, right?
Awesome.
So another perfect example.
No,
so, everyone asks me why, for like this podcast, why I shared my entity structuring, that structure, that cost me probably close to 10 grand in just setup, the fees to set it up. And then maybe another $2,000 just learning that this was what I had to do. I bet I could charge somebody, I could throw this and maybe put a little hour podcast around it and then sell it as a $10 package on Amazon. I'm sure I can get money off it. But why? Why would I do that, right? It doesn't make sense. I'd rather just give it out for free. Yeah, exactly. So, that's what I'd say. Treat everybody with the mindset that there is more than enough to go around. Cut people in on deals. That's, some of the easiest ways to start amazing partnerships is just do one deal together. Right. A deal that maybe you thought you could do yourself, but you got Joe Mueller over here that's been flipping houses since I was born, and I want to cut him in on it. So I'm going to learn something.
I'm not
from
that
him,
old.
Right? Even though I can do it. I'm just pulling your leg.
I know.
So, yeah, so
you're close.
Perfect example. Yeah.
That's awesome. You're close. So, I would say technically you go back to when I flipped my first house. I would say that's you were about 7 or 8 years old. I'm guessing if I do my math.
Okay.
That's pretty close. But I'm still not that old. I just started young like you did. Yeah. But that's one of the things I love about you, and your positive attitude, and a lot of great experience, a lot of great knowledge, man. I'm sure we could go on for hours just talking about all the things you've accomplished with your life and how you've grown your business, and that's really why I wanted to get you on the podcast, because you're an awesome investor. You're a great person. I look forward to seeing our friendship and our relationship continue to grow. So thanks for taking the time today again. Hey, one last question. You mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Any other? Yeah. I'm pretty sure you suck up books just as much as I do. What other books could you recommend for investors to read, or what's on your desk right now that you're reading?
Let me look at my shelf here. So, number one book in negotiations that I recommend to everyone is called Never Split the Difference. It's written by Chris Voss. He was the FBI lead hostage negotiator. And the reason I love this book is he makes the point that most negotiation books that you read, they assume that people will act logically, which is such a fallacy. I'm sure if anybody out there that's been working pre-foreclosures, have you ever had a lead where the guy could have sold the deal to you and pulled some money out of the equity, but instead of doing that, he just decided, nope, just let him take the house because I don't want to deal with anybody unless I can get the money I want. That's a perfect example of somebody acting emotionally as opposed to logically. Logically, they should take the short sale.
Right.
But emotionally, they don't want to kowtow, or they're steadfast on getting the price they want, and then in the end they lose everything. They don't get anything, right? And potentially a deficiency judgment.
Happens all the time in the foreclosure world, to be honest. So many people are getting, probably, as you said earlier, they're probably getting, if not 5 or 6, direct mail pieces, they're probably getting 15 to 30 potentially, and depending on the area and what lists that these investors are marketing from, and they have opportunities to actually sell the property prior to foreclosure and make something, $5,000, $500, whatever it is, and they won't do it, and then they lose everything in the end, which is just, it's unfortunate, but you're absolutely right. Okay, so
I love that book because it teaches how to negotiate on an emotional basis. Perfect example is after I read that book, I went out and I closed that Winnetka deal. I made $78,000 on a wholesale fee.
That's
right?
Awesome.
So that's a great one. Another one coupled with that is if you're doing face-to-face negotiations, read the book called The Definitive Book of Body Language. And it is written by Alan and Barbara Pease, Pease. That is such a great book. They say over 70% of communication is nonverbal, and it's body language based. People don't realize that their body is basically the way they position it and how they position their arms and legs. It's telling the person on the other side of the table exactly what they're thinking, how they're reacting to certain things. So it's very important to be able to catch on those cues, right?
Sure.
So I think those two are great for negotiation. As far as taxes, I know we were just talking about the one that I read in college, and I still have it on my desk. It's called Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright. That is a wonderful book on understanding just baseline how tax deductions and credits work. That way, when you go talk to your CPA or your attorney, you can have at least a baseline level of knowledge to go off of. Because sometimes it's funny how many times I have sat down with a CPA and they gave me advice that was completely wrong, and I knew it was wrong. They didn't know it was wrong, but just because I read this book, I knew what they were trying to structure for me was incorrect. Right?
Wow.
So great book for
that's a powerful statement there.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane, right? Because, we are a niche client. Real estate investors are very niche. We're a very small subset of the population.
Right.
CPAs, they go to school to learn how to get the most deductions for a 9-to-5er, not
right.
for a business owner.
Sure.
So you need to understand that, right? And then I'd say the last one that I really like, I'll give you one that's not real estate related, but more for enjoyment of life.
Okay.
There's a book called Vagabonding, The Art of Long-Term World Travel. One of my goals is to travel the world and be gone at 2 years at a time. Nobody knows where I am. That's the reason I want to retire by the time I'm 35, so I have the finances to be able to do this. This book tells you how it's actually a lot easier than a lot of people think. A lot of people think travel is extremely expensive and you have to prepare and save up all this money. This book is great because it shows you how you can travel the world indefinitely with very little money and how to actually do it to enjoy yourself, as opposed to booking, going to France for 4 days and booking every tour and everything in those 4 days. You get exhausted afterwards, and that's not the way that I like to travel, right?
Sure.
I like to take in the sights, meet the locals, enjoy myself as opposed to feeling rushed in an itinerary. It's a great book. I recommend it to anybody that likes to travel or wants to travel one day.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. And I have a little a new feature to the meetup here, the Tannis Library, we call it. So I have all these books I've cataloged over the years, and I continue to buy because apparently I should have had that self-storage unit for books because all I do is hoard them.
Yeah.
And I never get rid of them. I never resell them. I'm like, no, you can't touch that book I haven't read in 10 years. So now I actually lend them out at Tannis for free, so you can check out each of these books. I'm going to order. I actually have Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Yes, yeah, exactly.
Abundance
there you go.
Mentality over here.
And I was surprised
free.
how many people are taking advantage. We have a meetup, people show up, and then 2 or 3 books, 4 books get checked out, and they get returned the next time. I think that's awesome. So I'm going to get.
I'm staring at maybe 30 books I haven't cracked open in 2-3 years. All when I was first starting the company and learning. I'll add them to your library as well.
Ah, dude, that's awesome. I appreciate that. That'd be great. So I'm gonna get the other ones you mentioned. I have Never Split the Difference already, but actually lent that out to Dan Clarton a while ago, and I haven't seen that one, but hopefully I'll get that back soon. Because after you mentioned it the other day, I was like, oh, I got to read that book, Vagabonding, and then the difference. The definitive book on body language. I'll get those ordered up, get those in the library as well. But hey, one last thing. If the audience is interested in contacting you directly, or maybe somebody listening happens to have a self-storage facility available, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Call or text me on my cell phone, 630-408-8090. I'll pick up. I'll talk to you all day. Even if you have questions on starting your business or wholesaling in general, or if you want to partner with us on rental properties we're taking down. I think we're on pace to buy between 24 and 50 units per year going forward, and we've been doubling every year. So if anybody wants to get involved with that as well, let me know. And like I said, I got a ton of books. If you want to borrow some books or talk self-storage, just shoot me a text or give me a call.
Say that number again, 630-408-9080. Is that it?
8090.
Oh, I did it back. I dyslexified it. All right. 630-408-8090. Awesome that you're giving out your cell phone on the podcast because that's you're going to be who knows what's going to result from that, but that's incredible. That led me to a final question then. 24 to 50 units per year, and you're doubling that year over year. I mean, you're obviously getting into multi-families, right? Like 100-unit buildings?
Yeah, we prefer multis. So what we've been doing is we've been taking a 1031 centric approach. IRS 1031 is what's called a like-kind exchange for your listeners out there. That means that you can sell a building, not realize any of the taxes on the capital gains on that building, as long as you put it into all the proceeds into another real estate building. There are a couple rules that you should go talk to a 1031 custodian about as far as timing and selection and choice. But that's our approach. So what we've been doing is we've been buying 6 flats and 10 flats with partners, and then 1031 those into larger deals, a 24 unit, and then a couple 24s will 1031 into a 50 or into a 100.
Right.
And that's the easiest way to buy and sell real estate without ever having to take any taxes on them. Even all the way up into the point where you can gift these properties or these chains of properties to your heirs and avoid paying taxes on them altogether.
Are you willing to adopt me?
Yeah.
No, I think what you're doing is incredible.
Yeah, let's talk about
it. The 1031 exchange, is it better to have your buy asset picked out prior to even putting your sell asset on the market because of those timelines? I haven't talked to anybody about that.
Yeah, you only have 100. Yeah, you have 180 days. So I always recommend before you even, first of all, talk to the seller and say, hey, I'm going to be 1031ing into this, so please bear with me. And the same thing when you're selling your assets that you're going to be exchanging up. Tell the buyers, hey, we're doing a 1031 exchange, so certain timelines they have to hit,
sure,
certain things that we have to do, and the money has to go into certain places.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. Find the asset first, because the problem is if you sell your assets that you're going to be exchanging up to, and then you cannot find another property to put all the proceeds into, you immediately get hit with the tax penalty. So, that tax-free wealth book that I recommend to you guys,
right,
what they keep saying in the book is it doesn't matter how much you make. It matters what you keep. And unfortunately, the U.S. government is your biggest partner.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and they're always going to get their cut. So.
That's right. Well, thanks again, Fernando, for being on the podcast today. This is episode number 67 of the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. If you liked what you heard, please rate us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Fernando, again, I really appreciate your time this morning.
No problem. Nice talking to you, Joe.
I'll see you soon, hopefully, and we'll talk soon.
All right,
thanks again.
Bye.
All right, bye.